Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving into a topic that sparked a lot of conversation and raises some pretty big questions about who gets to decide what's true in public health. We're focusing on the recent removal of Dr. Paul Offit. He's a well-known figure from a key FDA advisory committee.
Right.
And the material we're looking at today, our source, frames this not just as some routine change, but as something much more significant.
Yeah, definitely far-reaching. It touches on power, ideology.
Exactly. And the very foundation, really, of our public health system. So our mission today is to explore the context, the implications of this event, using our source material to help you understand the different viewpoints and what it could mean for public trust.
And what's fascinating here right from the start is how our source immediately encourages us to look beyond the headlines.
Right.
To consider the deeper currents, influencing public health governance. It sees this one event as like a window into much larger patterns. It really does seem that way. Our source highlights Dr. Paul Offit as a key figure in this story. Now, if you've been following vaccine news, you'll likely know Dr. Offit. He's known for being a very vocal proponent of vaccines.
Very vocal, yes.
And a consistent challenger to the anti-vaccine movement, especially the arguments coming from people like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he was removed from the FDA's Vaccine and Related Biological Products Advisory Committee. That's a bit of a mouthful. We'll just call it VRBPAC.
VRBPAC, yeah. And it's really crucial to get why VRBPAC matters so much. Okay. And why his removal, according to our source anyway, isn't just a small administrative thing. VRBPAC isn't just, another committee. It's set up to be this cornerstone of scientific transparency.
In a really sensitive area.
Absolutely. Think of it like the place where vaccine policies face their toughest scientific tests. You've got independent experts just digging into the data.
Right, the clinical trial data, manufacturing.
Yeah, all of it. Evaluating risks, benefits, and crucially, doing it out in the open, in public. Its main job is making sure these huge decisions about vaccines are based strictly on solid science.
Just the facts.
Just the facts. Grounded in reality, data, not rumor or, political wins. It's supposed to be a key safeguard.
Okay, so when someone like Dr. Offit, who has this strong reputation for defending the science, is removed from that kind of body, well, our source jumps right on that.
They really do.
They say, hang on, this isn't just a simple bureaucratic reshuffle. There's a much stronger interpretation here.
Definitely. From the source's perspective, this isn't merely about one person losing a committee spot. It's read as a calculated political act.
A political act.
Yeah, and an ideological maneuver. The source paints it as revealing this dangerous intersection, convergence, really.
What?
Of corporate interest, maybe wanting certain outcomes, of populist rhetoric that can kind of bypass the scientific consensus, and also this broader backdrop of a weakened public health infrastructure in the U.S. It's like a moment that shines a light on how these different forces can mix in ways that are, pretty worrying for science-based decisions.
So following that line of thought from our source, what does this event signify in the bigger picture? Our source uses what they call a socialist lens here.
Right.
And frames this specific incident as just one piece of a much larger deliberate strategy. They see it as part of a broader pattern.
Or dismantling.
Yeah, the systematic dismantling of science-based governance in favor of reactionary politics and opportunistic populism. That suggests it's not a one-off, but a sign of something more fundamental shifting.
That's exactly the argument. And when the source mentions this socialist lens, they're really asking us to look at how power, money, and scientific institutions connect, especially within a capitalist system.
And who wins or loses from that?
Precisely. Who benefits? Who loses out when those systems get challenged? So from this viewpoint, Offit's removal isn't isolated. It's seen as a strategic move, part of a wider effort to undermine institutions whose scientific findings might clash with, say, political or economic goals.
Right, if the science is inconvenient.
Exactly. The argument is that this broader pattern is about shifting control away from scientific expertise towards other interests, political, financial, whatever they might be.
Which definitely raises that crucial question, who actually gets to set the agenda for public health? The source argues that pushing out experienced experts like Offit is a deliberate way to weaken the whole process, especially when, as they put it, expertise clashes with their agenda. They call it an old playbook where expertise itself becomes suspect.
Yeah, evidence is treated as elitism. Science is painted as a conspiracy.
That's a powerful claim. It suggests a calculated effort to control the narrative and maybe the outcomes, too.
It is, and the source argues this strategy often pretends to be something else. When experts get sidelined, it's sometimes framed as, the people speaking up.
Like it's grassroots democracy.
Right, a victory over the elites. But the source draws a really sharp line here. They argue that what looks like a grassroots movement might actually be, in their words, authoritarian populism, just dressed up as grassroots authenticity.
Wow.
They state it very strongly. This is not the people. This is not democracy. They see it instead as a ruling elite using anti-establishment rhetoric while serving their own political survival.
That's a really critical distinction they're making, isn't it? It's about how language, how rhetoric can be used to mask what the source sees as the real motives underneath.
Exactly. The language is a tool, and this is where that socialist analysis goes deeper. The source reframes the whole vaccine debate. It's not just about health, it's fundamentally about power.
Power.
Yeah, they ask who has the authority to define truth, who controls the institutions, deciding if a vaccine is safe or needed. In their view, in a capitalist society, these public health bodies are always under pressure from private interests. Pharmaceutical companies wanting profit, politicians needing donations, media outlets chasing clicks.
Sure, those pressures aren't entirely new.
They're not new, but what the source emphasizes is that something's changed. It's worse now.
How so?
They argue this existing pressure is now compounded by ideological warfare. They point to figures like RFK Jr., where, again, expertise itself becomes suspect.
Right, the idea that science is elitist or a conspiracy.
Precisely. Evidence is treated as elitism. It creates this environment where the very idea of objective truth-seeking gets challenged, when facts, scientific consensus, are treated like they're just constructs designed to fool people.
Then it's hard for anyone to know what to believe.
Exactly. It leaves people vulnerable to narratives driven by ideology, not evidence. The source suggests this creates a world where truth isn't found through careful study, but dictated by whoever benefits from redefining it.
That's a pretty chilling idea. If the concept of scientific evidence itself becomes suspect, the implications go way beyond just one committee or one vaccine. It points to a much bigger erosion of trust.
Absolutely. And the source argues that actions like removing Dr. Offit send a really strong, and they'd say dangerous, message. When the government, quote, purges experts, it fundamentally erodes trust in the very infrastructure of public health.
Because committees like VRBPAC are supposed to be about transparency.
Exactly. Their whole point is to show the public that decisions are based on the best evidence, free from influence. So, sidelining voices like Offit signals, according to the source, that loyalty to political power matters more than loyalty to evidence.
Which could lead people to think politics trumps science in these crucial bodies.
Right. That maybe political convenience or ideology is taking priority over scientific rigor.
So it's not just about Offit or even VRBPAC itself. It's about chipping away at the belief that these institutions are trustworthy. And our source says this isn't just happening here.
No, not at all. The material we reviewed presents this as part of a deliberate, broader assault on public health institutions.
Like what else?
The source points to similar things like the purge of CDC's advisory committee, the removal of seasoned regulators. They argue it's not just a few isolated events, but fits a wider pattern. The dismantling of institutions that safeguard collective well-being.
So they're framing it as a systemic issue, not just isolated incidents.
Yes, elevating it beyond one case to a broader problem where the very foundation of public health is being intentionally weakened.
And what's the end game there? According to the source's argument, is there a bigger goal than just affecting policy?
From this viewpoint, yes. The source describes it as essentially a class struggle.
A class struggle over public health.
Yes, a fundamental battle over who gets to control the narrative, the direction, even the definition of public health. This struggle, they argue, is ultimately reshaping the terrain of truth itself.
The terrain of truth, what do they mean by that?
It suggests that truth isn't some fixed objective thing, but more like contested ground, constantly being shaped by competing forces. The implication is that powerful interests aren't just changing institutions, but actively trying to redefine what counts as fact, what's authoritative, in areas vital to public welfare.
That is a stark analysis. Okay, so bringing it back down to earth, what does all this mean for you, the listener, the everyday person just trying to figure things out? Our source makes a pretty blunt claim here about who pays the price.
Yeah, they argue very forcefully that it's the working class, that ordinary people are left with a weakened system.
And what does that look like practically?
Well, the source paints a clear picture. They say The poor, the workers, the marginalized will be most vulnerable because these are the people who rely most on a strong, accessible, trustworthy public health system.
Right.
So when vaccines get delayed because of politics or outbreaks spread because disinformation clouds public health messages, it's these communities that suffer the worst consequences health-wise, economically.
Even life and death.
Yes, and the source draws a sharp contrast there.
About who doesn't suffer as much.
Exactly. They conclude that the wealthy will always find a way to shield themselves, implying that access to good health care, reliable information, protection, it becomes a privilege, not a right.
Creating a kind of two-tiered system.
Precisely. Where health and safety aren't universal goods anymore, but commodities for those who can afford them. It's a serious warning about the real-world impact on most people's health and safety.
Okay, so if that's the diagnosis from this source, what's the proposed path forward? What kind of action are they calling for from this socialist perspective?
Well, from their viewpoint, the response needs to be pretty clear and cover several bases. First, they insist public health has to be shielded from political meddling and corporate greed.
Shielded how?
They argue committees like VRBPAC need to be strengthened, but also democratized, made accountable not to politicians or companies, but to the public itself. For them, that means protecting scientific integrity, making sure scientists' expertise serves the public, and isn't just dismissed when it's politically inconvenient.
So empowering scientists and the public, not just officials or corporations. What else?
Second, they call for actually democratizing health governance. Bring workers, patients, community representatives into the decision-making process.
So it's not just elite experts or private interests.
Exactly. Get diverse lived experiences factored directly into policy. Third, they really push for exposing corporate influence.
Oh.
By rejecting both extremes, the denialism of the anti-vaccine populists and the profit motives of big pharma. They argue both, in their own ways, undermine public well-being and skew priorities.
And they mentioned a global angle, too.
Yes. The final point is about international solidarity. They argue this fight for a science-based health policy is global. When a major country like the U.S. weakens its system or lets ideology trump science,
It sends a message.
a powerful, and they'd say dangerous, message worldwide. It kind of legitimizes similar moves elsewhere, creating ripples that hurt global health and scientific trust.
Wow. We've certainly covered a lot of ground today, haven't we? Really gone on a deep dive. From looking at Dr. Offit's removal through our source's lens as a political, ideological act, to their analysis of this tension between science and populism, the potential erosion of public trust.
Right, the systemic implication.
And the potential impact on everyday people, plus the source's ideas for a more democratic, protected health system is definitely a lot to think about.
It really is. And maybe this leaves us with a final important question for you, our listeners, or chew on. If, as our source argues, science is never truly neutral in a capitalist society.
That it's either weaponized for profit and control or defended as part of the collective struggle for human liberation.
Right. And if vaccines are fundamentally public goods, these lifelines protecting everyone, especially the vulnerable, then what's our collective role? How do we make sure that truth and care aren't just things that can be negotiated away, but are actually guaranteed for everybody, particularly those who need that protection the most?
A profound thought indeed on the value and the active protection of scientific truth and public health. That's a powerful challenge for all of us to consider. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into some really critical issues today. We hope this exploration gave you a clearer picture of the forces at play and maybe some new perspectives. Until next time.